Hello all. My name is Melanie Naranjo, Chief People Officer at Ethena, and I'm so thrilled to be chatting with Michelle Nguyen, Senior Manager of People Operations at Nuro, in our latest edition of How We Tackle People Stuff at Ethena. Michelle, I want to say first and foremost, thank you so much for chatting with us. We're always eager to highlight our incredible customers, learn from their experiences, and share their stories with our wider community. With that said, I would love to just kick it off by having you tell us a little bit about yourself. What was your journey into HR and how did you get to where you are now?
Yeah. I've been at Nuro for about 6 years, but in the
Yeah.
HR space, I've been in HR for about almost 9 years. And so I started off as an HR coordinator and worked my way up. But I think in the last 6 years at Nuro, that's where I've really seen growth. I joined Nuro when it was around 150 employees, being the first HR person they hired. And so, as you can imagine, I wore many hats. I did compensation, benefits, ER, all that fun stuff. And as the team and the company scaled, that's when we started to set up our center of excellence. And really, my passion always lies. Still continues to lie in people operation. And so that's where I knew I wanted to continue my career. And so I was able to kind of really pivot back into people operations. So as of today, I manage both people operation and people technology, really kind of supporting our stakeholders from our business partners to our leaders to really ensure that we are empowering them to be efficient with the tools and the resources that we provide.
That is honestly my favorite type of HR background. It's sort of throwing you to the wolves and you learn a little bit about everything. And as you grow as a company, you yourself grow just by virtue of having to take on more. It sounds like you really thrived in that environment. I'm curious to know, speaking of Neuro and some of the growth that you all saw, tell us a little bit about your company. What do you all do and how's the growth been going?
Yeah. So we are considered a self-autonomy company, but I will say that in the last 3 years, we've pivoted our strategy. So I'll kind of share a little bit of background from when I first started and what we were focused on. When I joined Neuro, our company was focused on the autonomy space, but also the hardware piece, right? So we were building out bots, and our goal was really to provide self-driving vehicles that will allow people to um, really pick up their goods and services, right? So we weren't focused on getting a human from point A to point B. We were focused on getting products and goods from point A and to point B. And the reason behind that was our founders really believed that we were spending a lot of time focus on running errands. So to the grocery store, to Costco to pick up toilet paper, things like that. And so they wanted to reduce the time that we were spending on errands and really allow, people to spend time with their loved ones or spend time doing the things they loved. And so that's why we were focused on service and goods. Since then, we've actually pivoted our strategy and we're really more focused on the autonomy. So really that software, and that has happened within the last 2 years, where yes, we still have bots out there, but our goal is to really focus on that software and implement it onto existing cars. And so that's kind of where our strategy is. In terms of growth, we've seen tremendous growth, but we've also been impacted by the economy, like most companies. And so when I joined, we were at 150. We scaled up to about 1,500 within the 3 years that I was here.
It's
And
wild.
then yeah, and then in the last 3 years, we've actually kind of reduced that. We unfortunately had to go through two layoffs. And so we went from, 1,500 to around 700. And so as of today, we are growing, but I wouldn't say as much as when I first joined, but we are more thoughtful about the talent that we bring in. And so the people that we bring in, we really want to make sure that they really believe in our mission and, our vision for Neuro and are excited about our product. So that's kind of where we're at as of today.
I can hear your excitement, your passion about your company and everything that you say, which is one of the things I love about HR as a career and as a field, because you can do HR in any industry. And so it's kind of wild when I talk to different HR professionals and I ask them, did you ever envision working at a company like this? And half the time the answer is no, but I'm so excited that I do now and I've learned so much. And I love your point about being able to focus a little bit more on your employees, making sure you get it right with being excited by the vision, having passion for the company, because I do think that's so key. And it's been, while it has been a wild few years in the economy and for the corporate world over the past few years, I do think, to your point, it's been a really interesting and valuable opportunity to really take a closer look at every company's value props, what we're doing to set employees up for success, what expectation we're setting in the interview process. So I'm really glad to hear that you all have had a chance to really hone in on that. I'm going to pivot a little bit because I suppose we should talk about Ethena. Ethena, we are, as you know, a compliance training company, and you all signed on with us a few years ago. We'll talk about that in a second, but I'm curious to know when you were first looking to switch or get a new provider, what problems were you trying to solve, and why, in the end, did you go with us?
Yeah. So I think in general, people ops, we focus a lot on streamlining and optimizing process. So we're always looking at ways to really be efficient with everyone's time. And so that was what led us to kind of look for a different vendor. We had a vendor that was just really painful to manage. It was a lot of manual work for my team. And especially at Neuro, we have a lot of internal mobility, or we have a lot of, folks that become IC and then they become managers. And so those different rules that require changes in our training, like the harassment prevention, where now supervisor has to take a 2-hour course, all that was manual. And so we were spending, a lot of hours just really kind of looking at the data, extracting it from our HRIS, and then kind of feeding it into the vendor. And because changes happen so often, we weren't able to kind of keep up with that. And so that was a huge gap in our process. And honestly, for me, I didn't want my team to spend time doing that. I didn't want my team to spend, 5 hours to really just audit the data. That's not useful of their time. And so we were looking for a system that would allow us to just really do a one-time setup and then leave it. So that was the goal and that was the intention when we were looking for different vendors. And Ethena really just checked off all the check boxes that we really were looking for.
That is wonderful to hear. I often have people ask me, as an HR person who works at a compliance training company, so are you obsessed with compliance? Is that why you joined? Absolutely not, right? And I think that that's part of it's important to talk about that and acknowledge that, right? It's not necessarily that compliance is always the most fun thing, but it is something that you want to make sure is taking up the least amount of your time if there's other stuff that you want to be working on. And so being really smart and intentional about what compliance solution you move forward with, what compliance vendor you partner with, can do a lot to help free up your time to work on other things if in fact compliance is not the reason you get out of bed every day in the morning. With that said, one of the things that I was really excited to see about your account setup is that you've launched over 5 courses with Ethena. How did you work cross-functionally with your team internally on what courses were critical to train on for your employees?
Yeah, so we partner very closely with our employment council to understand, what are the requirements from state to state. So I think when we transitioned over to Athena about 3 years ago, we were also expanding in terms of geographic. So mostly we have most of our employees in, California, but I think when we were doing that transition, COVID also happened. And so a lot of people relocated to different states. And so as of today, I think we have about, we're registered in about 10 to 15 states where we have employees. And so each state varies when it comes to compliance. And so we work very closely with our legal counsel to ensure that at least the fundamentals are kind of set. And then based on, what our business goals are, that's where we decide, this is where we should implement a different training, cater to anti-bribery or corruption. That is one that we've, implemented, I think, in the last 2 years, just because we were also expanding. We were working with a lot of different vendors and partnership. And so we wanted to make sure that our employees had that knowledge on what to do when they are interacting with partners and external consultants. And so I think it was one, just looking at kind of what are the requirements that varies from state to state and establish those. And then second, what are the business goals and what are we trying to achieve within the next couple of years? And how do we provide our employees with that knowledge so that they feel that they have everything, they have everything they need to know when the situation arises.
One of the things that's really interesting to me hearing you chat through this is I've heard from a lot of people in the HR space. To your point, compliance is very important. You want to make sure you're doing the right thing by state, by law, with every law, in particular, as companies become increasingly distributed. And one of the things that people are always concerned about is overtraining and getting the right training to the right employees. And I heard that you all are doing certain trainings to certain subsets of your employees versus assigning all trainings to all your companies. To all your employees. Tell me a little bit more about that. How are you deciding which courses go to which employees, and what's the thought process behind that?
Yeah. So, how we decide who should be taking the different types of training is really based on their role and what that kind of entails. And the reason why we do that intentionally is training does take a lot of time. I think, internally we're always having a conversation about training and making, we've built an internal calendar for the HR team and we've listed out all the trainings that need to happen. And, Athena is one part of it where, it houses all of our compliance training. But we also have a lot of other trainings that happen outside of Athena, like we, have our workplace training, all of that. And so it's a lot for employees, and we're asking for them to spend a lot of time on these trainings. So we really want to be intentional, and we want to make sure that the content that we provide them is valuable. And so, when it comes to the example I'll use is that anti-bribery course, it doesn't apply to everybody across the organization because not everyone is going to interact with external partners or vendors. And so so if we decide that, hey, this training is going to be launched, we want to make sure that the audience that it is launched to makes sense. And so it's not one of those things where, since we're picking this training, we should do it for everyone. Again, we don't want people to have that training fatigue, which happens a lot. And especially with our managers, I think managers, we ask a lot from them. Earlier I told you that we're going through spring performance, and with spring performance, we also have manager training. And so we really want to be intentional with the content that we're sharing, but also the timing of those trainings to make sure that they're not overwhelmed. Because the worst thing that they'll do is, if we say, hey, you have a training that you need to do within 60 days, they're just going to play it and they're not even going to pay attention to it, right? And so again, we want to be really, really really, really thoughtful of how we're thinking about what training and who should be the right audience for it.
So relatable, like truly could not relate more. I know we're running short on time here, so I'll jump to my last question here, which is you've been with Athena for a few years now, and so you've had the opportunity to see us go through various refreshes and updates to our content, changes to our features. How do the different versions of our content resonate with your learners?
I think one of the things that I really do appreciate about Athena is when there is a refresh in the content, it resonates with our learners because it kind of aligns with today's time, right? I think our previous vendor, the content didn't refresh very much. And so some of the content was really outdated, right? It's like something that you would see back in, back in the days, like 20 years ago, right? And I think with Athena, because you're very focused on getting the most relevant situation, or in today's world, it you take that and you apply it to the training. It's more digestible for the audience. Like, we just went through our compliance training. I just did the supervisor training. I did actually all of the training, the security training that I had to do. And going through it, for HR, we have an internal policy where we have to do it every year. And so like for me to do it every year, it's not fun, but like I think Athena makes the content fun and makes it relatable because again, it has a lot of topics where it is something that we talk about in today's society. And so I think that's what makes it really great with Athena. It's the content is really up to date and really aligns with what's happening in today's world.
I think that's so well put. I will say one of my favorite things to do when I'm taking our training, because of course I take our own training as well. And similar to you, I'm like, but I know all this stuff already. Why do I have to take the training all the time? I actually love doing it on mobile and I listen to it like a podcast while I'm, let's say, cooking dinner. And there's still the checks on learning. So I'm confident that, either I understood the material and can answer the questions or I can't. But to your point, it's really great having refresh material versus having to listen to the same thing every time. And in particular, there's those nuanced, relatable scenarios. I'll be honest, even myself, sometimes it gives me pause and I have to think for a second and think, oh, yeah, that could have been risky. Like I could see maybe accidentally doing that thing and thinking it came from a place of good intent, but it might not have landed that way to someone else. And so I couldn't agree more. It's really, really helpful to have genuine, relatable, refreshed content every year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I went through some of the questions at the end, there was like one question where I was like, and I actually think I got it wrong because I was
Oh,
like, oh,
neat
yeah,
learning opportunity though, right? Is good. That means it's good. It made you think twice.
yeah, absolutely.
Love that. Well, Michelle, thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us about your experience with Athena. I'm so excited to have you as a longtime customer, excited to keep this partnership going. And we will share more for anyone else who has future questions down the line. Thank you again. Really appreciate it. And I hope you have a great rest of your day, Michelle.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.